never a natural disaster big government can't spin as an excuse to call for, you guessed it, more big government. This week, Senate Democrats moved forward on a bill to refill Federal Emergency Management Agency's depleted spending account with an additional $6 billion. That would cover Texas wildfires and New Jersey Hurricane Irene damages. Republicans sound like they're on board. Today, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor said, quote, "I'm not for holding up any money. I'm just for acting responsibly," unquote. Here now to discuss are my freedom fighters, Fox Business Stocks editor and my colleague Elizabeth McDonald, radio host and Freedom Watch regular Nancy Skinner, and John Popola, Emergent Order co-founder. John, to you first. Does the federal government have any business bailing out owners of private property who were uninsured or underinsured or took the risk that a natural disaster would not strike?
Oh, I don't think so, Judge. I mean, you know, it's funny because I actually have very personal connections with both these places. I'm actually here in Austin, Texas now, and my family is in New Jersey, and so I care a lot about, what's going on. But there's a bunch of problems with having basically unaccountable, politically minded bureaucrats shuffling money into these areas. I mean, for one thing, you have reviews of FEMA spending that basically show it correlates with political interests. Like, they put money where basically in swing states.
Right. Nancy,
so
that's not what you want. Nancy, my guess is that you would argue that this is a core function of the federal government to save the property of people who are in desperate straits through no fault of their own. But hear me out. The San Francisco earthquake, the Chicago fire, not far from where you are now, the floods in Galveston, Texas, all taken care of, all cities rebuilt, not a nickel from the federal government. Where'd we go wrong?
Well, first of all, Judge, I got to say that, after all these Republican governors were beaming about how good a job FEMA did in preparation for Irene and praising them for the work they did, it's ironic that Republicans are playing silly politics and challenging for offsets or waiting for formal declarations when we had tornadoes, we had hurricane, we had wildfires, extreme flooding and heat. It is freakish string of weather, okay? And so FEMA, why would the private sector ever help people in search and rescue operations or help them get their footing? I worked with FEMA. I helped rebuild flood towns after the '93. I got a presidential award for rebuilding flood towns as models of sustainable development after the floods of '93. FEMA does not make people whole. FEMA is there for search and rescue, to kind of keep people, to put up trailers to get them to the point where they are. They don't insure and rebuild your house or do anything like that. And if we're going to spend trillions on wars in Iraq, as Pat Leahy said, we can spend $6 billion on Americans in America who are in dire distress.
Is it any of the federal government's business, or stated differently, isn't the federal government the least efficient means to solve property problems caused by natural disasters? Won't the decisions be made on a political rather than an economic model?
It's an important question. I tend to agree with Nancy, though, because I do think that we need to help out the distress, but it does lead to unintended consequences, Judge, of the people still continuing to build homes in flood zones, which is the equivalent of building them in the middle of a highway. But Governor Chris Christie, to Nancy's point, has also said, look, we don't have time for budget offsets. There are people in dire distress right here, and so we need to help them.
I hear, John, our colleagues, Nancy and Emac, saying, I feel sorry for these people. I think we should help them. I feel sorry for them, but if I want to help them, I'll do so voluntarily. When the government helps them, it takes money away from us with the force of a gun, whether we want to be charitable or not, and takes those tax dollars, which it doesn't have, it has to borrow them, and uses that to help them. That's not charity, that's force.
Well, I totally agree, Judge. I mean, first of all, it's sort of bizarre and really counter to the evidence and to history to say that civil society, which is what you're talking about when you say private industry, that civil society is not going to step in and help their fellow man. I mean, if you think about it...
But it does, how can you say that? That has happened. Look, that has happened time and again when people have not stepped in because of apathy. And by the way, it's not at the point of a gun that, tax collections are done. No, they're not. Not at the point of a gun. No, they're withheld. No, that is not true. That is not true. I've covered the IRS for decades. You do not show up on every doorstep with a gun.
You must know a different IRS than I do.
Well, I covered them for about a decade. It doesn't happen that way.
Let me suggest this to you. If insurance carriers were required to pay for this, then private industry would step in. But when the government tells people, don't get insurance, we'll take care of you, We're left at the
yes,
mercy of
you know,
politicians.
you're absolutely right, and that is a problem. And I'll tell you something, Judge, and you know, Representative Eric Cantor is spot on. By the way, if government spending was the way to go, then Zimbabwe will be a AAA country. But but quickly, after Katrina, there was massive waste, massive government fraud, and problems with the cleanup of Katrina. Let me just advise you to pay your taxes, and they'll come after you with guns. We're going to switch gears to California.
Wait.
Which is
I got to say one more thing about this.
Nancy, we're going to switch gears to California, which has come back with a firm no to Amazon's offer to create 7,000 jobs and invest $500 million in the state in exchange for repeal of the state's sales tax on internet products. But with a 12% unemployment rate, can California really afford to pass up thousands of jobs and risk watching another company flee to friendlier state borders? Stated differently, Nancy Skinner, isn't this a dumb move on California's part? Wouldn't it actually earn more money with more people working there and more people paying California income taxes than by Amazon leaving the state?
First of all, I just have to note that the bill was introduced by State Assembly Member Nancy Skinner. Not me, but we're both environmentalists, and we've met before. You know what? Here's the thing. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, said for capitalism to work, you have to have competition, fairness, and full disclosure of information. So what is the difference? What's the distinction between a brick-and-mortar company that has to pay taxes for when they have offices in that state or an internet company? Adam Smith didn't have the internet. We have C Corps, S Corps, whatever they are. They're still corporations. Why
Nancy, libertarian that you are, you agree with her, right?
Well,
absolutely.
So,
what's the distinction?
I'm asking him if he agrees with you, Nancy. Hang on. Go ahead, John.
So I do agree with Nancy in the sense that I have an idea about equality, that we have equality under the law. And so to me, a good law is a law that applies to everybody equally. Something that the progressive vision of politics really is against, by the way, because they really love to carve things out for their, the boondoggles and the railways and the green cars and all the other stuff that's putting, California basically bankrupt.
Got it. Isn't it a dumb move
I say basically lower the income tax.
Got it, John. Isn't it a dumb move on California's part to insist on this sales tax, which will earn them less money than if they got rid of it?
Yes, it's an incompetent move, and California has historically been fiscally incompetent. That's why businesses are fleeing the state. Amazon has every right to have, it has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders, to protect the bottom line and to basically say to California, look, we're not going to act as the in-state tax collector for you, and that's the way it happens, Judge, not at the point of the gun, through liens and levies and pressures to do it. That's the problem. There are 8,000 different taxing jurisdictions in this country. That's the flip side. That's what businesses across the country, retailers are having to deal with. I have no quarrel with Amazon saying, forget it. We can't afford to keep
John Coppola, Nancy Skinner, Elizabeth McDonald Skinner, next time.